A petition has been submitted with the intention of having the FDA require or force Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna to amend current product labeling for more transparency. This would affect the Comirnaty and Spikevax COVID vaccines. That is the subject of today's episode. And so from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's non-rule-making docket is an action that is titled Requests that the FDA require that the sponsors of Comirnaty, Spikevax, Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine amend current product labeling. Now, why do you think this action has been put forward? Well, as we here at Trial Site News have been reporting and chronicling for quite some time now, there are lots of concerns about the lack of transparency associated with the COVID-19 vaccines. And now there is apparently a move to do something about it via the organization calling itself the Coalition Advocating for Adequately Labeled Medicines, otherwise known as CAALM. This action is led by a professor with a significant scientific pedigree from the University of Maryland, Linda Wastala. Now, the members of CAALM also include a small group of academics and scientists, several of whom have served on FDA advisory committees. They are also signed on as co-authors of this action. Now, the petition for modified COVID-19 vaccine labeling clarity originates with this group, and they are asking the FDA to update COVID-19 vaccine labeling to ensure comprehensive accuracy and transparency, touching on 10 key items associated with safety and efficacy issues, as well as to notify physicians and providers via Dear Healthcare Provider communications. Here are the 10 points identified in the letter to the FDA back on January 31st of this year. First, CAALM is requesting that they add language clarifying that Phase 3 trials were not designed to determine and failed to provide substantial evidence of vaccine efficacy against SARS-CoV-2 transmission or death. 2. Add language clarifying that the immunobridging surrogate endpoint used in multiple authorized indications has not been validated to predict clinical efficacy. 3. Add safety and efficacy results data from manufacturer randomized trials of current bivalent boosters that reported results after the emergency use authorization was granted. 4. Add a clear statement that FDA authorized a new Pfizer vaccine formulation containing Tri's buffer without requiring clinical studies to evaluate efficacy, safety, or bioequivalence to the formulation containing phosphate buffer. 5. Add a clear statement disclosing that a Pfizer Phase 3 randomized trial in pregnant women, NCTO 4754594, was completed as of July 2022, but there have been no results reported. 6. They want a clear statement that Pfizer vaccine efficacy wanes after 2 months following dose 2 according to the Pfizer Phase 3 randomized trial. 7. The following adverse event types should be added to the adverse reaction section of labeling: a multisystem inflammatory syndrome, or MIS, in children, pulmonary embolism, sudden cardiac death, and neuropathic and autonomic disorders. 8. The following reproductive health and lactation-related adverse event types should be added to the adverse reactions section of labeling: A. Decreased sperm concentration, B. Heavy menstrual bleeding, and C. Detection of vaccine mRNA in breast milk. And then for number 9, add frequency data for clinical and subclinical myocarditis. And finally, 10, labeling should present trial results on serious adverse events in tables with statistics as is done for non-serious adverse events. Now, CAALM also raised a couple of key points, and we're going to go over them. First, were the Phase 3 clinical trials associated with the vaccines designed to assess or provide evidence that the vaccine stopped transmission or death for that matter? The point here is if the studies were not designed to see if they stopped transmission or death, then claims in the market should not be made. For example, early on, President Biden declared that if you received the vaccine, then you would not get COVID-19. But that turned out to be a lie, or at the very least, misinformation. Another key point. They ask, are the use of immunobridging surrogates as endpoints used in multiple authorized indications validated in association with likely clinical efficacy? What they're talking about here is predicting clinical efficacy with less than complete data sets has been a recurring theme or pattern associated with regulators during this pandemic. They use the heightened state of alert under emergency to, according to some critics, take shortcuts. The group CAALM wants to close any loopholes that could lead to dangerous outcomes, and their solution to this problem is handled by updating the labeling. The next point that CAALM brings up is, did Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna yet to include clinical trial data associated with Omicron bivalent boosters? The answer, of course, is no, they have not. These products were authorized via risk-based approaches, including immunobridging and other methods. The group CAALM is concerned about the labeling indications and wants updates. Next issue here is, did the FDA address the fact that Pfizer added a tries buffer to its vaccine formulation? Less clinical trials as a standard means of studying safety, bioequivalence, efficacy, and the like. Critics that have frequented our site at trialsitenews.com, such as Dr. David Weissman, have argued that the drug companies haven't provided proper evidence, not following GXP. This necessitates updates to labels and more research in standard GXP scenarios. The next issue that CAALM dealt with is one about pregnant women. We here at Trial Site News have documented that pregnant women were authorized to access the vaccines first by physician societies, then by the CDC based on real-world data. A clinical trial sponsored by Pfizer never released their results. So the question then is, how does this impact the use of the COVID vaccines by pregnant women? What should the label denote? The next key point that is discussed is, what about waning effectiveness, the durability, breadth, and lack of neutralizing ability? You see, the vaccines wane in a matter of months, while they also lack neutralizing capability, meaning stopping transmission. And so CAALM is asking, should this be covered in the label? Now, you might be asking, why does all of this matter? Well, see, what the U.S. regulators do tends to not just affect citizens here in the United States, but it can also influence governments from around the world. If Moderna and Pfizer are made to amend their transparency, it will no doubt cause ripple effects around the world. And why does that matter, you might ask? Well, there is a lot of confusion amongst health regulators around the globe. As an example of this, let's take a look at the EMA. In November of 2022, the European Medicines Agency, or the EMA, recommended both the Comirnaty and Spikevax vaccines for use against COVID-19 for children 6 months and older. But earlier that very same year, in January of 2022, the European Medicines Agency also warned against possible over-vaccination from the COVID vaccines. Marco Cavallari, the EMA head of biological health threats and vaccine safety, raised significant concerns about the present mass vaccination scheme implemented across the European continent at that time. Cavallari went on the record about the potential harm of ongoing COVID-19 boosters, declaring that they, quote, can be done once or maybe twice, but it is not something that we can think should be repeated constantly. And of course, now here in the US, the FDA has recommended annual shots going forward. It seems like a bit of a mess now, doesn't it? It will be interesting to see what actions the FDA ends up taking on this request by CAALM. Naturally, we'll keep you posted on how this all turns out. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. For more content like this, be sure to check back to this channel daily, Monday through Friday, or for written articles every day, 7 days a week, check us out at trialsitenews.com. And as ever, always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.